Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to WeatherBrains episode 966 for the 22nd of July? It is. Time is flying along here. Hey, this is the pre-show, the magical part of the program where we do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and from time to time we say very, very, very outrageous things. So hopefully you've had a good week. And I do believe we're going to need to do a Thursday night special this week. Next week will be an off week. For me, every week is an off week, but next week I'll take some time off. And so I would imagine that we'll probably record next week's show Thursday night. So most likely we'll have a Thursday night special this week. And of course, we'll release the show Monday night of next week. So a programming note there. Going to go to Chicago. Going to catch it. We're trying to go to all the major league ballparks. So we're going to go to see the White Sox. We've been to Wrigley. We have never been to Guaranteed Rate Field on the south side. So we're going to see a White Sox game, and then we're going to take the Amtrak train to Milwaukee and catch a Brewers game. They'll take on the Braves. Rick, how are you?
Good evening. I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. Looking forward to this show tonight. Can't wait.
Yep. I'm guessing have you seen the movie yet?
I have not. I think I'm the last person in the Weather Enterprise
Uh, there,
uh,
there's a few. There's a few. Yeah.
um,
It's
I really had a chance last night, but it was dressed like James Spann night at the local professional baseball park. So I had to go throw out the first pitch and wear the little suspenders, and
you
so
can't
I
miss
couldn't go
that.
last night.
Yeah.
No, I had to be there for the dress like James Spann night. But
Yeah.
no, the reviews look really good. Um,
It's the meteorologist reviews are really positive. Much better than I mean, I thought it was going to be good, but it's even better than I thought as far as from the some of the tougher weather critics. Um,
yeah, no, I usually with anything there's just a flood of negativity. Doesn't matter how good it is. It just people tend to be negative. But I've seen very little negative feedback on it, which is a sign they did something right, which is good.
yeah, I
So I
think
sent
so.
is Bill going to be on the show tonight?
I think Bill is out. He said he was having to have dinner with someone. I can't remember what he said, but he said he was going to miss it. But
Oh, we
uh,
know what that means. It's 50-cent beer night at Hooters. I mean, we know
that's
exactly what that
code.
means. So,
That's code. We know what that's for. But
so,
yeah, I
so
know. I
no,
know Kevin
well,
got the link and Sean got the link, so they'll be jumping on here soon.
okay. Um, yeah,
But yeah.
in fact, I will be off work next week. And again, after this little baseball trip, I should have a couple of free nights to go see it. So I
Yeah.
will look forward to seeing it. But boy, the numbers look tremendous on the money that thing brought in. Wow.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it
Uh,
like more than
it's it.
doubled some of the early predictions or some of the early forecast numbers. So it was
I think
it,
that's just a sign there's a hunger for this kind of product.
Mhm, mhm.
There's no.
It's a
It's
big
just a good.
summer blockbuster movie and people are going, they're trying to get people back in the theaters and it's just a great I mean, it's tornadoes, it's action, but then you got Glenn Powell in a white t-shirt in the rain, it's just like I think they did a really good job with the marketing, which we can talk about on the show, but I was a little afraid how that was going to go because with all the tornadoes this year, it's like in one way a natural promo for the movie, but in another way an anti-promo for the movie. So, but yeah,
Um,
whatever circumstances came together, it worked. So good for them.
well, good for them. That is good. Yeah, we'll hold the discussion for the actual show here.
Yep.
And for those watching, if you're looking for the actual show content, move the slider over about 6 minutes, and that's when the show starts. But you might miss something good on the pre-show here. But yeah, we'll need to schedule a show for Thursday night. I notice on my calendar I've got a weather radio programming thing, and hopefully we can get another meteorologist here to go handle that because it's in Anniston, which is about 1 hour away,
Mhm.
which would run me late. So I'm hoping that one of my good friends next door here, that my colleagues will be kind and go do the weather radio programming live shot for me Thursday so we can start on time at 7 Central that night. And then that's my last week off until Christmas. So we'll be on Monday nights throughout the regular for the rest of the year. And we need to figure out when show 1000 is going to be. We're at 966. I mean, we're getting close here.
Getting close.
We are,
Yeah. I
you
thought it
know,
was like,
we're
I thought we had calculated it was St. Patrick's Day or something like that, but
yeah,
that almost
it's
seems too far
clearly
away.
going to, it's going to wind up sometime at first quarter of next year.
Yeah.
We need to do the calcs on that, but
Yeah.
it would be nice to do it somewhere, cool in person. We need to get a planning committee. Murray, he's not here. Whoever's not here, we'll put him in charge of the planning committee for the show 1000. Um, that's what happens when you don't show up. Is that you're railroaded in?
One of our guests is getting a message saying the James Spann's meeting room has another meeting in progress, and it's just giving him a blue screen. So I don't know what that means.
Well, I'll try it again from this. I sent it from the Zoom app, but I'll do it one more time. So let me pull up their email addresses. Jen, is that you?
Hi, it's me. Can you hear me okay?
Are you home again?
I'm home again. I'm all settled, but boy, I like being on the road. It was awesome.
Wow. How many miles did you travel?
I need to calculate that. I had to get an oil change, let's just say that, halfway down the road. It was probably, goodness, 2,500. That's probably underestimating it. I was everywhere. Making my way from Ohio to Florida. I probably should do a quick calculation on that.
All right, so I just sent the invitation one more time to our two guests. And maybe that'll work. Here comes Dr. James A. from Tulsa Town. Hopefully Neil will be on the show tonight.
All right, just one
All right,
way
what have I
from one way from my house to where I was going in Florida near Sarasota that's almost 1,100 miles. So that's 2,200 just
Wow.
there and back. That doesn't include all
Wow.
my other little jaunting around. So maybe 3,000 miles. I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah.
So did you get any good gas station food? That's the key question
I
here.
went to Buc-ee's for the first time.
Buc-ee's.
Yes, I got
It's
their
the
barbecue.
Disneyland of the Deep South.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
It was awesome.
I go by these things and there's so many cars out there. It's just like I want to stop and go in, but it's like a Walmart, a week before Christmas or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's an experience. You have to go at least one time in your life.
Yes.
Oh, I have been in there. I mean, we've got them, here, but it's. I mean, you can go by there Tuesday at 3:30 a.m. and it's wall to wall people in there. I mean, it just doesn't stop. I just don't understand it.
It was awesome.
When I first heard about it, we had some relatives from Texas, and they were saying, "Yeah, we left early this morning on the way here because we wanted to stop at Buc-ee's." And we were like, "What's a Buc-ee's?" They said, "It's a gas station." I was like, "Well, wait a minute. You left early to stop at a gas station. What is up with this?" And they said, "Well, it's not a real gas station. It's like," and so they described it. Anyway.
Yeah.
You got to go just for the bathrooms alone. I mean, that's
show title. We have a show title right there, but we can't use it because we're not on the air yet.
Oh, we can find a way to sneak that back in. Yeah.
Yeah, just yeah. No, but
cool.
I am literally just as happy going to the Shell right across the street and getting a Hunt Brothers pizza or hot wings. I mean, but Buc-ee's is cool. I will admit that. So we are now on television. Welcome to our television audience. We We are glad you are here. This is the Monday night weather party. The weather is relatively calm. We have no severe storms in progress here. So let's get this thing on the road. We're going to record track number 1 and track number 2. And here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You're listening to WeatherBrains. They're kind of a big deal.
In the words of Bill Curtis, we're kind of a big deal, or maybe not. Hey, whatever. This is WeatherBrains, episode number 966. You know, we might not be the best weather podcast in the world, but by golly, we're the oldest weather podcast in the world. For those that don't know, we started this show in 2006, and we're coming up on show 1000. We were talking about it in the pre-show. It will be next year. Looks like the first quarter of next year we'll have show number 1000. So since Bill Murray is not here.
Yeah, and you notice,
go ahead,
James, that Bill did say kind of. So, you know.
It's St. Patty's Day. That's our 1000th show. St. Patty's Day is.
That's right.
So we're in March.
Yeah.
So since Bill Murray is not here, we're going to put him in charge of figuring out where this is going to happen, how we're going to get there, get the WeatherBrains corporate jet, you know, to all the airports involved here and pick us all up. And we're going to find a central place and have a show 1000. It'll be in the spring. So looking forward to that. But I do see that the melodious tones of Troy Kimmel down in Austin, Texas, now in SEC country, Southeastern Conference. It just means more.
Well, remember, I'm an Aggie, so been there, done that. So for at least a while.
Yeah, well, that is true. So, you know, the one thing we're missing over here, Troy, is the heat. I can't recall the last time we hit 90 here. Yeah. It's been remarkable.
We're here in Austin. Looks like in the next couple of days. I think Camp maybe a little slow with this, but we actually, if we get to next week with what we're seeing the rest of this week, we may end up with the month of July being below average at both of the in-city first order climate sites. So that'll be interesting. It may not be by very much, but in the middle of summer around here, I'm with you, James.
Who'd have thunk it? Who'd have thunk it? We'll be in the 80s here all week. Let's go to Tulsa Town. Dr. James Adelot is on the line. James, what's on your mind? Tell us. I sense there's something on your mind you want to talk about.
Just a big old empty space up there. There could be a lot on my mind because there's just a lot of empty room. No, we were in the 80s again today. We'll be back above 90 by Wednesday, but 7 days in a row with highs in the 80s for the last half of July. We will take that every day and smile.
Yep.
Yes. Yep. Indeed. We're smiles here. So Jen has been on the road far, far, far away, many miles, many places.
Sabbatical. Yeah.
That's
and
right.
She is back from her long journey. So are you rested or are you exhausted?
I was very, very tired when I first got back. I still need to calculate exactly how many miles, but I'm thinking 3,000 by the time you put in all my little jaunts. But my ultimate goal was Venice, Florida, to see my best friend and my goddaughter. I made it down there. But before that and after, it was a lot of tornado history. The last week, I did 7 libraries in 2 days, and it was awesome and got a lot of information. And then made my way to Murphy. My newsletter article is next week, and I will write about the Murphy experience and some of the folks I got a chance to interview, and they were amazing. Some people who had not shared their story in 50 years. And so I was honored that they talked to me about their story. So that was really awesome. But I made it back. I'm home. I'm ready to hit the road again. And so I will be doing that in the fall. I'm actually going to go meet Thomas Cruzulis. So that is a bucket list item for me. So I will be doing that in the fall.
And he's in what, Vermont, New Hampshire, somewhere up there?
Never been up that way before. So that's going to be exciting.
And for those that don't know, we actually had him on the show not that long ago. So you need to go back and watch that episode. But I think, Jen, what you're doing is just too cool. It is just outstanding. Documenting really in detail what's happened with some of these horrific tornadoes. And we didn't have that 100 years ago. We don't know. And future generations can learn from what you're learning.
Yeah,
we'll
and
hand it down.
well, Kim just asked what I do at the libraries, and just quickly, I call ahead. I had a 21-page itinerary, and I call ahead to the libraries to see what they have. And I'm looking for things that you can't get online. Newspapers.com is pretty amazing these days, but there are little nuggets of information that you can only find at libraries. A lot of the newspapers are not online, so a lot of them will be at the libraries, and we're talking bound books. And if they're not there, then I'll sneak over to the courthouse or the actual newspaper office. When I was in Murphy, I went to the Cherokee Scout and they brought out all of their bound newspapers and they let me take photos of the newspapers, which is amazing because there's a lot of photos in there. And then you get a little bit more on the story and find out who the people are. And when I was in Murphy as well, I'll start going into maybe some of the death records. I know it sounds morbid, but we want to get it right. Who passed away during the event? We want to make sure we spell their name properly as well. And so we will dive into that. And I say we, for me, it was me, myself, and I on this trip, but Zach was with me. Zach was with me in Coleman. We finally made it back to Coleman that first week because the week we went in August, the library was hit with the storm. Remember that, James? And then the library actually closed down. So we went in there and then did some research. So that's what we do at the libraries, but then we've started to expand it out to the city centers and all that kind of stuff. So it's really, we just want to get the story right. It's very important to us to make sure we have everything documented as correctly as we can. And everyone we meet is just, they're wonderful. And they ask all the, what are you guys doing? And then I'll hand them my card and you never know what connections you're going to make. And then in Murphy, it was meeting with survivors and having them share their story. And so that was very powerful. And I did my first tornado talk where I actually was with the mayor, so you guys got me talking. I'll shut up in just a quick second, but it was hosted by the mayor, the emergency management there in Cherokee County, and also the museum was there and the newspaper. And then we had residents who came and I talked about what are tornadoes, tornado safety. And then we talked about all the tornadoes that had hit Cherokee County on record, which there have been 10. The worst, of course, was the F4 in 1974. And so we presented that and then had people, share their story if they wanted to, ask questions. And it was pretty cool to be able to do that too.
Jen, one thing that you didn't mention specifically, but I'm so glad you're doing that, is unfortunately a lot of the local journalism we see through local newspapers, it's not that not online, they're out of business.
Yeah.
And so I've done the same thing where you sneak into a library and get that bound volume, and it tells you so much, and that newspaper is no longer existing.
Yeah, it isn't, and it's sad to see. And there are still some that are holding on, digitally, but to have that piece of paper. And when I was in Enterprise, Alabama, I went into the library, and there was one of the ladies who works there handed me a stack of newspapers from 2007 from the tornado that hit there, and I said, "Oh my goodness, let me go take photos." And she goes, "No." She goes, "Just take them. My kids were going to throw them away anyway." And so I'm like, "Oh, okay, I'll hold on to those." Those are just gems of information and just stuff you're going to just treasure that has so much information in it. And I really just value, it's probably going to be my pick of the week is your library. Please go to your local library and look at all the information they have and, be friends with your local newspapers and museums because they love talking about this stuff. It's very, very interesting.
Awesome. Yeah, we could talk about this all night.
I know.
No. This is great stuff. But we must move on. Dr. McLean, you started all this, so but I'm glad you did.
Yeah, I know. You can count on me to completely derail any train. But shiny. But yeah, we'll have to have a whole show with Jen talking about all of this. I know we've talked a little bit in the past about some of what you've been cultivating with Tornado Talk, but what's so great about this is the community connections that you're fostering too. And I just can't love enough how much you're helping people to feel heard and remembered. And, if there's any community that is interested in being, just sort of being that witness and having that heart, it is us. These are the things that our field longs to hear about. And so there's a perfect marriage there for someone who can come in and put it all together. And that is so much work, but it's work you're undertaking. So yeah, thank you. And we will really appreciate you.
Thank you, Kim. I really appreciate that. It means a lot, and there's a lot to come. I've got some great ideas that have come up from this trip, and it was really needed for me to go. And it's one thing to do things, and talk to folks on the phone, but when you can get face to face and really see their passion for telling their stories and communities that want their stories told too, it's amazing. So thank you.
Absolutely. And again, we need to do a whole show on what you're doing, because this is great stuff. But Rick Smith, I'm going to let you introduce our guest, because we're going to have an amazing show tonight. I feel good about this one.
Awesome. I'm so excited to have our guest with us tonight. We have two very important people. If you've seen the movie Twisters, or even if you haven't, these two people are two of the people that, if you were impressed by the movie and you were impressed by some of the science and meteorology in the movie, these are two of the guys that deserve a lot of credit for that. I'm not going to read their whole bios, because we're going to talk about some of this, and you can go to the website and read it. I want to save time to talk. But our first guest is Kevin Kelleher. Kevin, former director of the GSL, the Global Systems Laboratory, former deputy director of the National Severe Storms Laboratory. He used to share an office just across the hall from me there before he moved on. He retired from the government in 2018, but he's obviously still working, as we're about to hear. And Kevin was, I'll save that part. And then we're also fortunate to have Dr. Sean Wall with us here tonight. Sean works for the National Severe Storms Laboratory. He's been there since 2016. He spent half of his life at, not half his life, but bachelor's, master's, PhD at OU. So Sean's been around for a long time there in the building and in the community, and he had a lot to do with the movie also. So we'll save that here for a minute. No spoilers on the what we're going to talk about. But what we're talking about is Twisters, the movie. And just to give you some stats, Twisters opened officially on Friday. And on the opening weekend, the North American ticket sales were $80.5 million in just over 4,100 theaters across North America. That's about 30 million more than what analysts were predicting the movie would do. And it's the biggest opening of a live action movie yet this summer. It's just underneath what Oppenheimer opened at. So those are big numbers. And I think internationally it's like at $125 million. So this has exceeded all expectations in the box office. And one little cool bit of trivia, from what I read, the Warren Theater in Moore was the top grossing theater anywhere in the United States for the movie. And that's where Sean and Kevin and I saw it for our third time together Wednesday night, and got to see it with Kim. And I don't know, the meteorologists and the weather geeks in this weather community here locally contributed a chunk to that $80.5 million, I guarantee it, because people have gone back multiple times. So Kevin and Sean, thank you so much, and welcome to WeatherBrains.
Glad to be here.
Same.
Kevin, we'll start with you, because you've been intimately associated with Twisters, but you started off with Twister back in '95. How in the world did you get involved in the movie thing to start with, all the way back with Twister?
Well, a lot of it is just luck. And I'm going to just take this camera down a little bit. I just found this in one of my drawers here. And this is an original Twister t-shirt that's in really good shape. So apparently I didn't wear it much. But, and then, they give you a little bit of bling as you move along through these kinds of things. And they gave us a hat for Twisters, and it matches. So I could go around with the Twisters and the Twister and probably look pretty good, at least color-wise. But it's a lot of luck. So Don Burgess, who's one of the great meteorologists who has almost a photographic memory in terms of can tell you every storm that ever hit Oklahoma, probably anywhere else in the Dayton and everything about it. He had moved on to the Weather Service, and he had been doing interactions with the media, and that left a gap. And so they asked if I would fill the gap. And at that time, we were just doing like B-roll interactions with local TV. So they'd have it for the spring, and we did Nova and National Geographic, but those were few and far between. But other than documentaries and B-roll, and then if there was a big event, of course, there'd be a lot of attention to the lab, and we, like May 3rd, a mess. But I didn't think there was much to deal with until we got this call. And I've told this story several times, but the first call that came in was from someone from California, and said they want to come out and do a video. They said, we want to come out and film. And I said, great. And then about a week later, they called back and said, well, we want to come out and film, and we need to set up a schedule, and we need to know who's going to be there. And I was like, I'll be here if I'm not. There's 5 or 6 other people. We do this all the time. It's not a big deal. And they said, no, we really need to know, who's going to be there, and we're going to be there for a couple of days. And that's when I started to think, this is not what I'm used to. Usually it's a guy with a camera, maybe if you're lucky, 2 people come. Anyway, it turned out that they explained they were doing a feature film, which I didn't know what it was. And then they said, well, you buy the popcorn, you buy the Coke, you sit in the theater, and that's the feature film. And I said, okay, well, this is the first time I believe that the NOAA labs ever got involved in such a thing. So that was the beginning of it all. And then we just had such a good outcome in terms of how it made NOAA look, how it made the lab look. And there was some early nervousness there, because originally NSSL was the corporate guys in the well-funded, black sedans with all the money in the world. And we told them that's not accurate. We've been spending a lot of time trying to talk to Congress about getting some funding. And if we look that way, and by the way, you want us to help you make us look bad, pretty much. They weren't the good guys. So we got through all that. But Kathleen Kennedy, who was the producer, and she was on site in our first meeting. She stepped out of the room, came back, and said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put NSSL off to the side. We're going to make it corporate versus university. And can you help us now? And we were all on board. And that was a building of trust, because 30 years ago, it's probably it's still true now, but 30 years ago, scientists had a lot of skepticism working with the media. And I think maybe it was probably, from their perspective, well founded, because you talk to the media oftentimes, and maybe they don't understand it, they don't get it, or they're in a hurry, and they kind of skim across the top. They might get it wrong, and then you get this negative feedback from your colleagues, right? And that's a sensitive area. So we had to build some trust with them, and the outcome was, made meteorologists look less geeky, right? So we were kind of cool all of a sudden, especially storm chasers, and enrollment at OU kept going up, and almost it got to a doubling point. And we were told that other universities experienced similar things with meteorology. So it was a great outcome. And I had kept in touch with the producers from time to time, and they would call, and we would talk about some scripts, but it never went anywhere. So I gave up. And then they called, 2.5 years ago, just about, and said, we think we've got something we want to do. Do you want to be on board? And of course, I said, yeah. So I was retired by then. And so this is not work. Rick, you opened up by saying, yeah, I'm retired, but I am not working. This is too much fun to be work. It's a blast. If you ever have a chance to do it, or if you've done it, you'll know what I'm talking about.
I would love to do it. I mean, you've got the coolest job. I thought I had the coolest job, but now you've got the coolest job. Okay, and we'll get more into twisters here in just a second, but where you came in on the project on Twister versus Twisters is a little bit different, right? I mean,
Yeah.
By the time you came in on Twister, they were pretty far down the road script-wise and story-wise and all that, right?
Yeah, so they were. And, I was working at a full-time job, kind of like Sean has. And so, it had to be a little bit respectful of our time as well. Bill Paxton did come about a month early, and he was coming off Apollo 13. I have a little show and tell here if you like. And he had done this with Tom Hanks. And I don't know if you can read any of that, but it's kind of a blurry. But anyway, it's a nice note from him to me, and just it says thanking us, basically. But Tom Hanks had kind of been a mentor, I think, in some regard, and told him that if you're doing a technical role, it's best to try to learn as much as you can before you do that role. And so, based on that, after he finished with Apollo 13, he came out, and I had a big enough office. I gave him a desk, a place to hang out, and he was there for several weeks, if not a month or more, before the shoot actually began. And he would hang out in the library. We were doing Vortex back then, Vortex 95. So that was the first biggest, largest experiment, which was right in the heart of what the movie was about. So he had a firsthand shot at seeing what we were doing for real, and observed the whole way we organized it and strategies and all kinds of stuff like that. So he was well prepared by the time. But what we would do is basically Kathleen Kennedy would come out and maybe every 3 or 4 days, and she'd have a piece of the script, and she'd say, "Here's what we're filming. What do you think of the dialogue?" And so I would give comments and so on and so forth, or I would check with like Harold Brooks, who's really good about giving some feedback, and some other folks, and then we would pass that back as here's what we think. And like I said, this trust building, they would use as much of our suggestions to move it more towards the science as they could. And an example was the original script, and I've mentioned this once or twice before, was about a multi-day event, a single thunderstorm, a single tornado over multiple days, where they take time out to go to their aunt's house and have a dinner and sleep, and then get up the next day and they go off to the same tornado. That wasn't really great. So we talked about options, and we talked about an outbreak. And so we got some books out of the library. We talked about the Xenia, Ohio, or some of these major outbreaks, like the 1974 event, and boom, that was it. So that kind of solved that problem. And but those are the kinds of things that we helped with in the first one, and that was a good relationship. Everybody came out looking pretty good, and then kind of became, a standard for this second one, except this time, back to your question, I get to be involved basically with the raw script with the first writer, Mark L. Smith. And, went through the entire script, and not only talking about technical terminology that just about every technical phrase they used there, we had a chance to go over and change or do whatever we wanted to do many times. And I have 5 full types of, over the 2.5 years, or certainly 1.5 years that we went through, and talked about situational awareness, what they would be thinking, what they would be doing, how they would be approaching the storm. Does this make sense? Does the dialogue make sense? All of this kind of stuff. With the ultimate goal is that I knew that at the end of the day, for me, I'd be on a thing like this in front of meteorologists, and the goal is that I don't get hammered, right? And I told them that. So you present alternate ideas. If it's not great, you tell them why, and then you present some ideas, and it's up to them whether they want to use it. But almost every single time they moved it towards the science, the better science. And then they had to take some liberties because, we also, first thing was like, here's all technology that has changed in the last 30 years. What do you like? What do you want? We looked at dual pole, we looked at all kinds of things, and some things got a little complicated for them and for the script, and didn't want to, make it too difficult. So we came up with the phased array and a few other technology things, drones and stuff like that, and that seemed to work pretty well, and the storyline wasn't complicated. But the first should have brought the sketch. The phased array that we were drawing up, they were saying, what is this going to look like? So we drew up what would be a big enough phased array to have a generator and the computer and the power and all this kind of stuff in it. The feedback, I think, probably came from Steven Spielberg. I don't know. It was like, it looked like a mailbox, an oversized mailbox, an ugly, oversized mailbox. So that was out the window. And then they came up with this more portable design, which, isn't technically correct, but for Hollywood, they had to be able to pull it out, stick it in the ground real quick, and to get all that action scenes in there. So that's some examples, but you get the idea.
Okay, I love how you just casually throw out Steven Spielberg's name there, but I mean, he's an executive producer on this, and he's played a big role in the movie, and you've actually had several interactions with him.
I've never met him, but we, on the first film, like when I mentioned that Kathleen Kennedy walked out of the room to change the script, basically positioning NSSL off to the side. Later, it was told that that was who she was talking with, and it kind of freaked me out for a minute there. But that on and off during that first movie, that if there was something major, she would talk to him, and then near the end there, we would just talk together like a and stuff and kick some ideas, and then she and he called me a couple of times. Once I was in the parking lot of a Walmart in Colorado, and they called and said, we have an idea for a script. And I was like to my wife, okay, it's going to take a few minutes here. We're going to talk this through. So it's, he's a regular guy. It sounds like. I'd like to meet him someday, though.
Yeah, that would be cool. Okay, so I'm going to jump over to Sean here, because Sean at some point in here also gets involved in the movie. Now, Sean, you work at the lab. You participate in field projects, and you build equipment for chase vehicles for the lab and things like that. How in the world did you get involved in this?
So kind of like Kevin, a lot of my involvement, I think, was almost pure luck and just good timing. Obviously, I worked with Kevin for years, and you kind of learn, like working at the lab and just being in the weather center space, there's a certain echelon of people that they don't really give tours that often, right? So like if somebody like, the current lab director of NSSL, like Dr. Danae Carlos comes down, that's somebody that's important, right? That's somebody that means something. So here I am, I'm working downstairs, I'm working on a truck, I'm designing something, who knows. And I see Kevin, and I haven't seen Kevin in years. And like, obviously I knew that he used to work there and that he'd moved on from the lab. And, presumably by that point, I'm pretty sure he was retired. So here's Kevin with these just two people giving a private tour to in the middle of the day. And I had no idea who they were, but I was like, obviously these people are really important because like you're with Kevin. So I ended up talking to him, just really discussing a lot of like the different vehicles that we use and like the imagery. They were really, really interested in how things looked and like what it did and, things like that. I ended up finding out later that it was one of them was Isaac, the director of the movie. So of course, like then I'm like, oh my God, like this is Twisters, like this is so exciting, like this is so cool. So I ended up having a conversation with them, and I was really energetic and just kind of talking about a lot of the work that we do and a lot of the equipment that we have. And Isaac was so impressed, I think, by just the sheer amount of material that was available at the Weather Center. He came back with a number of people from like the art department and like the set design team, basically to come back and try to capture some of that imagery that you see in the movie. And you see a lot of references back to like direct vehicles that I work with at the lab, from the trailers. Even if you haven't seen it, like you've seen the inside of Tyler Owen's truck, which is this like, shoddy wood grain with like these big red switches. That is directly out of the vehicle that I drive at work. They loved it so much. They were like, we're 100% recreating this. So I ended up just kind of talking with a lot of the people involved in the film that's kind of behind the scenes to try to build all of these sets and pieces. And in that conversation, I told the art department team of Universal Studios and Prairie Surf Studios on a multi-million-dollar project, I was like, hey guys, like, look, I know you guys are good at this. I do this for a living. I build these racks all the time. I was like, let me save you some effort. I will build the equipment racks for you because I can do them faster, better, and more accurately. And they were like, great. That's one less thing we have to worry about. So I ended up just essentially giving them a parts list. A semi truck showed up to my house like 3-4 days later with just a ton of stuff. Like my neighbors are like, what is going on? This dude looks like he's building something out of Twister. And I'm just like, oh yeah, it does. That does kind of look like that, doesn't it? So I actually built a lot of the props for the movie in my garage in my front yard. I've got pictures of me putting it together. And just through that process, I got to know a lot more people and interact with a lot more people and just kind of kept getting my hands in different departments. I had conversations with Ben Snow and Industrial Light and Magic about what tornadoes should look like and what hail should look like. It's not all spherical, right? It's not the same size. I had worked very closely with the playback group, which is the team that does everything. If it shows up on a phone or a screen or a tablet or a monitor, like they're the group that designed it. I helped them design and build a number of graphics. Picked all of the radar imagery that you see out of the movie by hand. Those are real radar data cases from real events, so none of it is faked, to try to bring that authenticity to the film, which is what Kevin was like really wanting to highlight. And I think we did a good job, but maybe I'm biased.
Well, Sean, that is so amazing. Okay, so we have to know, are you being recruited by Hollywood yet to do set design, especially for anything sci-fi? I mean,
Yeah.
it's remarkable. They had to have been over the moon grateful for you, and I just love that you made it all here in your like yard. But yeah, I mean, come on, what's the Hollywood future here?
So if anybody from Universal Studios is listening, you know, I've already told Kevin, like, when we do the sequel for this one in a couple of years, like, hit me up. I'm ready to go. I really enjoyed bringing it to life. I still stay in contact with a lot of the art department team. I've actually had some input on a few other movies, shows, things like that they're now reaching back out to me on, because they're like, hey, like you were so helpful here. For example, there's a new Superman movie that's getting made. And spoiler, I may or may not be a correspondent for the Daily Planet in the Superman movie that's being made. I actually wrote a tornado article for the movie that's going to show up in one of the newspapers. So it's been a ton of fun. Kevin and I also got to go out to LA for the Hollywood Climate Summit, which was an incredible opportunity. And I was really, really thankful that we were able to go to that. And afterwards, I had a number of people from Universal kind of coming up to me and being like, have you ever taken media training, or like, are you like an actor on the side? Like you guys, like you and Kevin both were just very smooth and poised and responsive. And Doug, I don't know Doug's official title. Kevin, you can correct me. I think he's like an assistant director or something like that. He was like, have you ever thought about being an actor? And I'm like, hey man, you let me know. Like if anything comes up, I'm there. I'm 100% in. So it's been a ton of fun.
Wow. Well, that's the show, folks. I mean, I don't know what else to say. No, that's awesome. I mean, I've heard these stories, but that's just so cool. Yeah, and I mean, the theme of anybody's had a chance to work with any of these folks is just how interested they are in getting it right. Kevin alluded to this, and Kevin, I think the first time I saw you again after a long absence was when, I think last January, maybe, when the location scout brought just a handful of people out. And then we had another visit in February where the director and Doug Soak, who's the associate producer, Sean, that you mentioned, and Ashley Sandberg, the executive producer, others came out. And that's where we got a picture of, we sat Isaac Chung down in front of our warning event simulator and got him to issue a tornado warning for the El Reno tornado while he was there. And we took pictures of that. So that was fun. And then that was that big visit Sean talked about, where I don't know, it was 15 or 20 people from the production design group but right before they invaded Sean's space, they invaded our space with taking pictures of every pencil on every desk, our ID badges, they wanted our lanyards. They wanted a picture that my daughter had drawn for me when she was a little kid to be in the movie. I mean, they were just all over the authenticity. So, and Kevin, you were there for all of those visits, and I know you were kind of an interface, and you and I talked back and forth a lot on, Sean mentioned the playback, but some of the playback, there's a WFO, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it. We're going to try not to talk about real spoilers for the movie, but there is a National Weather Service forecast office in the movie, and they wanted that forecast office, even if it's in the movie for 48 seconds or however long it is, to look legit, and it does. And that was a lot of work. I mean, we talked a lot back and forth about what's on this monitor, what's on that monitor, right? I mean, there was a lot of details. It was just impressive to me.
Yeah, they were incredible. The very first tour, where it was a smaller group, Sean, your operation wasn't even on the schedule. And, you know, having worked at the lab and given so many tours, that was always a highlight. And so I said, we got to go down and see that area. I mean, that's where all the toys are, right? That's where all the radars are and sort of stuff. And of course, that was it. But what was really important at that moment in time was they were not sure where they were going to shoot the movie. And this was also the case for the first movie, that when Jan de Bont, who was the director of that movie, came through the lab, and we were on North Campus then, and we had squeaky floors, we had air conditioner that didn't work, it was a mess, and it was a building that was the computer error came in and it overtaxed the air conditioning system. So the solution was turn up the fan. So you could take a paper airplane, and this is not much of an exaggeration, in the hall downstairs and basically let it go, and the thing would almost just, it was this air current that flew down. Anyway, we thought, that was not great, but he loved it. And so that's why the first movie was here. But this movie, there were extremely competitive cities out there looking to provide tax incentives and other things. And this was all happening that we didn't know exactly, but they weren't sure they were going to shoot here until they came to the National Weather Center. And they saw all the things that were going on there, and they saw the resources out here, and they saw the people. And then this gave Isaac basically some ammunition to go back, because I think he always wanted to shoot it in Oklahoma, to go and say, we need to be here. And then the other things that, in the discussions I had with them all, was that you can go to Atlanta, as an example. Good luck trying to find the sky in Atlanta with the trees and the hills and everything else, and the population and the road system. If you want open sky and you want to be able to put storms in there that you can actually see. So all of these conversations eventually led to them doing it here, thank goodness, because I think it really displayed Oklahoma in a great way. But that wasn't an assured thing early on.
And I saw an interview with Isaac just the other day. I mean, we're constantly sharing videos with interviews and things that we run across, but he talked about how much different the movie would have been had they done it in Georgia, how much how much more visual effects there had to have been. There's no green, lush hills from like in Osage County with those wind turbines on it in Georgia, or I mean, it would have been a lot of inside work, I think. So I just can't imagine it being anywhere else but here. But yeah.
Early discussions that we had with them was some lessons learned from the first one. And I mentioned to them that there were delays in the production of the first one, which actually led to a very long filming period, unusually long, almost 6 months. And later I found out why a lot of that was happening. Didn't know it at the time. But what that meant was, if you remember, the first one had a lot of scenes, outdoor scenes of driving through cornfields and so on. Well, as they were mucking around internally, the corn kept growing. And so they ended up starting in Oklahoma, but having to move north into Kansas and Iowa, and ended up way up north. So it was sort of a flag that, if you're going to do that kind of thing, just be aware of that. And so those are the kinds of helpful things that we exchanged back and forth, and they would ask questions, and we eventually got it. But that probably helped because this one, it was an external problem. It was the writer strike followed by the actor strike, which was a 4-month block of time we had to stand down, basically. But when they saw that coming, they looked at all the things that were left to be filmed, and they filmed as much of that on the outside that they could, and saved what they thought would be safer to film. Oh, by the way, in the middle of this, were in parka coats. They were handing out those packet hand warmer things that you go when you ski, and everybody was all huddled up. And then when it was an actor's turn to be on, they would pull everything off, run over there, and try not to shiver in a t-shirt, in the middle of December in Oklahoma. So, but all of that they worked through, and people say, "Oh, it's really glamorous to be an actor." Well, maybe, but if you're doing an action film, maybe not so much, because they beat them up with fans and hail, and they just beat them up pretty good.
And that's one thing, that's just one of the little cool behind the scenes thing I think a lot of people don't realize is they started shooting like the second week of May, and they went until about the 15th of July, and then the actors strike started, and literally at like 2 a.m. they had to just shut down production when, it was midnight in LA or whatever. So then they came back in early December. So if you've seen the movie, or you see the movie, the rodeo, the Stillwater Stampede Rodeo, which is a big set piece in the movie, part of that was filmed in July when there were heat advisories and excessive heat warnings in effect. Part of that was filmed in early December, where it was hand warmers and parkas and breathing. You had to put ice in your mouth or something to keep your, the condensation, the you from being able to see your breath. So I can't imagine that. And like the grass wasn't green anymore. I mean, they're painting grass. I mean, it's when you watch the movie, you would never ever know that, but that's kind of just the magic of it.
Yeah, there's a question there that I think maybe Kim wants to ask about.
Yeah, Kim had, and we're gonna kind of just be all over the place. So we've got some great questions. People have submitted questions on social media, so we'll kind of just stop here for a second. And I think both Kevin and Sean might have an answer to this because I've heard you both talk about this. Okay, we're not spoiling anything, but Kate, it goes back to her childhood home in Sapulpa and out in her a barn. That's kind of her little workshop out there. And when she's going through her old stuff, she starts thumbing through notebooks and cloud physics and things like that. Those notebooks look really real. Was that someone's actual microphysics or cloud physics, or was that somebody's actual notebook that was used?
Cloud physics was one course I didn't take. And so they wanted something. So I went to the library and I pulled out like 3 or 4 books and I took them home and I talked to a friend of mine, Conrad Ziegler, who's a cloud physics guy. And I worked up what could have been a 50-page paper, but I condensed like 5 or 6 pages of the essence of what they would probably need for the movie, which was a bunch of work, right? And I bring it into them. I go, here you go. And they're like, oh, that's not good enough. And I go, what do you mean? They say, we want the real notes of a real class. And I'm like, well, I never took it. So they went to OU and they found a student and then they paid her, I think they paid her, or they just asked her to reproduce her notes from a real class so that any page they happened to flip through, of course, they did land on equations we all know, but it could have been anything, right? And that's how that notebook, which a nanosecond of camera time on 1 or 2 pages was a mountain of work, but that's the technical detail that they do.
I'll also add, Kevin. Oh, big echo. You may not know this. I actually also have quite a bit of books on Kate's desk. A lot of the surrounding material and the notebooks and things like that. I basically went to the set design team and I literally took every book off my shelf and I was like, any of this you want, you can use, like have at it. So a lot of like the thick binders and things like that are like research articles that she's got notes written on, like those are my actual like dissertation work books that are just scattered all over her desk to make it like really authentic, like she was a college student that was going through that. So like it's absolutely real, authentic college notes from people that have gone through that and have those struggles in the real world.
That's cool. That's really cool. While we're stopped here, let's just, Jen, you've got some really interesting questions from social media. Surprise, surprise. So, kind of go through some of the questions you've got.
Okay, yeah. This first of all, I do want to say I have not seen the movie yet, and so I am itching to go see it. It's on next couple of weeks. I will get there. But yeah, a couple of questions from the artist formerly known as Twitter. This came in from Greg. What was the main thing you stressed to the VFX team in order to make the tornadoes realistic? And was any of the CGI based off of real tornado footage?
Yeah, I think Sean and I, there were just under 400 people working in Oklahoma through the whole event. That's not counting that, I don't know how many, maybe more than that did the post-production. But anyway, so it was like, when they landed here, it was like tentacles going up 1,000 directions. And so I was interacting with people, Sean was interacting with people, and they may not have been the same people. But before the shooting even started, months before, we had a reference pictures and reference video that I had found on the internet for every single tornado. And I understand Sean was doing maybe a similar thing with the art department. And so there was nothing in the movie that wasn't an actual event or modeled after an actual event.
I'll also say that I think at some point just prior to production, Universal Studios actually contracted with Jana Hauser at Ohio State University, right? I've seen nods. Great. And then Sean Casey, who many might remember from the popular Discovery Channel show Storm Chasers a few years back. He actually went out and captured footage that the production, as from my understanding, then actually used, or at least used the basis of in the film. So I do think some of the shots are at least partially based off real footage that Sean was able to capture on some of their escapades out into the plains, we'll say.
Some of the cloud scenes,
Yeah.
but not necessarily that there weren't any understanding of the tornado.
Right.
One thing that you might find interesting is that Steven Spielberg and Kathleen Kennedy, she's Kennedy Marshall, her husband, Frank Marshall, she told me they'd wanted to make this movie, for maybe a decade. But the graphics capability, the visual effects, the VXF capability wasn't there yet. And so when they decided to make it, Industrial Light and Magic had just had enough capability to get those tornadoes that you saw in the first one. And one of the guys, Ben Snow, who was the VXF director, basic supervisor, whatever they call him, was in Twister, and he said he still had post-traumatic syndrome from trying to get that first movie out with the tools they had at the time. And when they asked him to do this one, he wasn't sure. It was bringing back memories, but of course they have many more tools now. But so there was about 6 people who were connected to the first movie and also the second movie too. Of course, they had in fact, the art director, Patrick Sullivan, was also one. He was a young guy in the first one. So there was some history there. And so was the production. The publicist was also involved in the first one.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, and Kim, you just posted this, like this is a really difficult task to try to undertake, right? The original movie 30 years ago absolutely set the standard. Like, I know Ben has PTSD, but he did a really good job, right? Like, that was the gold standard for at least like nature level, like CGI and special effects and that sort of thing. And this movie absolutely raises that bar again. Like, best special effects awards are coming this year. Like the CGI is incredible. And there's so much material now that's available. You can go on YouTube or Twitter/X, Instagram. I mean, there's so many people and there's so many chasers that are capturing footage, even pulling from things like Lee Orff's high resolution simulations on the computer world can really feed back into how these tornado structures should look and feel and evolve. And some of the tornadoes, without spoiling anything, like by the second or third time that I was watching it, I was like, yeah, I know the dialogue, I've read the script, I know the actors, whatever. I'm looking at the tornado, right? And like, that's the hard part, is making a structure of a tornado that looks real, given how incredible some of the footage is in today's world. And I think Industrial Light and Magic and Ben Snow just absolutely hit it out of the park. It's a masterpiece.
Yeah, I couldn't agree.
Something like 1 trillion data points went into the supercomputer to try to recreate the rotation, and it's all done by points, and then how you move those points through the graphics there. It was amazing.
Yeah. Jen, you got let's do a couple more questions here. You've got 2 or 3 more there.
I do.
That have come in.
So hopefully this one's not a spoiler, but there's a scene with blades of grass and airflow. And the question was, how true was that? Had to do with Kate.
Well, we talked about, this goes back to both Kate in this one and Bill Paxton's character in the previous one. There was a moment early in both movies where you were supposed to reveal to the audience that they had a special instinct for sensing the weather. And so Bill Paxton was in my office. He was talking about this upcoming scene where he's supposed to have this power or whatever, this sense. And I had nothing for him. I had no idea. I couldn't help him. I don't know. He was like, "Oh, is there an Indian, a Native American?" And I have no idea. So he went out there literally, and if you remember that scene, he reached down and it was in Maysville where we shot that, and he reached down and he picked up some dirt and he just kind of let it go through his fingers like that, and that's what he came up with, and we're fine. And so, she was supposed to demonstrate the same kind of powers. She got that dandelion and she let it kind of go up there, sort of like what Bill did. But in that scene, I won't tell too much about it because you haven't seen it, but there's a scene with 2 tornadoes, and then there's traditionally the right mover will take over, and there's reasons for that. But so they start chasing the traditional one, which is the one that has the most airflow coming from the southeast, and then the other one usually dies out. Well, they start to go in that way, and Tyler goes after that as well. And then she changes direction. What she sees is the wheat field or the grass going one and then changing direction. We were trying to come up with what the heck to do there. First, it was supposed to be over water, and then the original script said, well, it goes over a lake, and then the water kills it. And I said, well, that doesn't happen. So let's move on from there. So we're talking about other things that could happen. And they thought, well, it had to be visual, so they came up with this. Now, I don't know why. See, we didn't see everything before this was produced. I don't know why the wind went out and then the wind came back and then went out again. I mean, it's like one more time. You didn't need to do it all that. But yeah, there was this flow back and forth. I think they wanted to be very pronounced change in the wind direction. But that was what that was all about. That she saw the wind change, and that led her to believe that they needed to go after the non-traditional tornado.
Yeah, and I do think, because I've had this question come up a couple of times in a few other interviews about that like instinct that researchers or storm chasers have. And that is a very real thing, being able to look past the data and things. And like when I go out into the field, a lot of times I'm in a mobile mesonet vehicle. I can kind of cheat, right? Because I got an anemometer on top that's telling me the actual wind direction. I don't need to look at the grass or the leaves or trees or anything like that. But sometimes I go out on my own personal car and I will actually pay attention to like what direction the wheat's going or the trees or things like that to try to get a sense of the surface wind. Like Kevin said, I don't usually see it like surge out and then surge back. I think I'd be a little afraid if I saw something like that happen, but it's a lot of fun. I will throw out one real quick, like fun tidbit here, and then I think Kim wants to jump in. For those that have seen it, there is a fun meteorological term that gets thrown out by Tunde's character in that scene, which involves two tornadoes rotating around each other, which was a ton of fun to see for the first time, because I actually provided some input to that. There was some discussion about that particular scene and Isaac wanting it to look a certain way. And I actually brought them a case, the Pilger, Nebraska case, to demonstrate here's what a radar imagery looks like if it's actually doing this. And if, for those that know, Pilger, Nebraska had two very large tornadoes that were very close together. And the radar imagery kind of shows them doing that sort of like rotation thing, right? So I was like, yeah, there's this real cool term. It's called Fujiwara. And they latched onto it. And Tunde's character was able to bring that to life, which I got a really good chuckle when I saw that in theaters the first time. I was really happy.
Oh, that's so awesome. Yeah, I think we all loved that mention so much. I'm gonna make a quick comment about, chasing with the savants. We all in this field, we all know these people. They do definitely exist, just like the main character in the movie. I'll name one in particular that I know is familiar name to many chasers, Gabe Garfield. This is what chasing with him is like. I had no idea that this was a thing, a way of chasing, but we were graduate students at the same time. And I was still learning a lot about even just the mesoscale meteorology piece. So I was really looking to the sky to understand and try to anticipate what was going to happen, much like a lot of the characters in the movies do, or the movie does, in the movie do. But Gabe, he was focused on the surface, and he would look at things like birds, and he'd see them, like if there were birds in the fields that were going up in little spirals, he'd get really excited. And I was like, why? And he's like, well, those are thermals. They're following the thermals. They enjoy riding those. And that gives you an indication of the heat rising from the surface, that you have surface-based lift. And then he would connect those kinds of observations to the storm dynamics. And so, the field piece, seeing that in the film actually really connected with me and resonated with me. And this is what those savant chasers are like. Their brains just process these cues in a different way. They're tuned in a sort of different channel. And it is just amazing and remarkable. So I'm going to take that observation and use the prerogative of the person who has the microphone right now to ask you guys another question. I looking back over the entire film, I'm curious. There's been a sort of raging debate about, is this film a sequel? Is it a remake, or is it something else? What would you say? Because, not to give spoilers, but it's pretty clear there are connections to the original film. You've even drawn some in this show already, talking about there's a very distinct correlation between the character of Bill Paxton in the first movie, and then in this movie we have another young scientist that sort of has a similar set of qualities. And I mean, there are so many different echoes of the original. What would you say that it is?
Well, the very first time I get the first script, there were so many comments I put in there about you could connect here, you could connect here, you could throw this back to Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt, and it could be, it was like a no-brainer of all the connections that could have been made, and it could have been launched as a sequel. They didn't want any part of that. And I think there were some legal issues there. I don't know, but there was super sensitivity. So they said it's not a sequel, and some people called it a reboot, and some people call it a similar situation, but a different story. It's a new chapter in storm chasing. So they really did everything they could to distance themselves from making it a sequel, which was a shame, because I think it would have been great you'd have all that basis, and then people would just say, immediately connect with it. So you saw Dorothy in there, right? You saw some terminology, "I'm not back." I don't know if you caught that. This big line in the first one, and then the second one there. So there were these, they decided to hide these little Easter eggs and not make it obvious. That's to what they did. But I'll tell you something that really touched me in a big way. So I was on the set one day, and somebody said that James Paxton, Bill Paxton's son, is in this movie. And with all the time I had spent with Bill, I was just crazy, needed to meet him. And so we had a great discussion, and I was telling him stories about his dad and everything. I mean, it was emotional for a while there, and he was taking it in, he was getting emotional, I was getting emotional. It was awesome. And he's a legitimate actor. He's been doing it for a number of years now. So he has a cameo in there. And so there was a gal with him, and I thought it was his girlfriend, right? Later I found out, after about an hour of talking, she was the daughter of the writer, Mark L. Smith. So there's a couple more Easter eggs in there if you really dig into the nuances of the film. So they really tried to make ties that were fun to find out.
So that's a really long way of saying you don't have a specific what it is. It's just for sure wasn't intended, couldn't be a sequel or a remake. I'd be curious to know if you have a word you'd pin on it, either of you, Sean or Kevin. I've thought of it as an homage, in part because they do such a nice job of what you refer to as Easter eggs. They do that on multiple levels. One is harkening back to the original movie in some very obvious ways, and some more subtle ways, playing with the scenes and the shots and even the costumes. And you feel like, oh, that is Joe, like that. There are very distinct moments of that. But also, they have the Easter eggs for meteorologists. They clearly worked so hard in this one to plant so many things for us. And I thought it was a lovely homage. And that was like the sort of best word that I could think to put on it. What would you guys say?
Yeah, I think the best way that I've probably been able to describe it to people, and I think this is probably very similar to what Isaac has been telling people, it's its own story, right? It's in the same world. It's not completely independent. It's not a remake or a reboot or anything like that. Like, Javi makes a statement very early on in the movie regarding Dorothy that this equipment is proven technology, right? To indicate that it has a history. It's been used before. So I would say this story, while it is in the same universe, is its own tale. And a lot of those callbacks to the original one and the links back, I think is really a fan service to everybody that loved the original movie. I know, talking with Brandon Perea and his character Boone, one of the inspirations for that character was Philip Seymour Hoffman's character Dusty back in the original movie. And he really wanted to bring that feeling forward into this one. And I think he did an incredible job. I told him the other day, I was like, man, I've seen this 3 times, and every time I watch this, I fall in love with your character more and more and more every time. It's perfect. So I do think that there are a lot of callbacks to the original one, but it is certainly its own story.
Okay, guys, everybody, Sean, Kevin, and WeatherBrains, and everyone else here, I'm going to make an admission that back in 1996 and 1997, I refused to see Twister. Now, I did see Twister once, but I insisted on a bottle of vodka. And I enjoyed the vodka a whole lot more than I remember anything about the movie. I just, from a science standpoint, I could not stand to go and see this. And so I just had a great bottle of vodka that night. Y'all have me hooked now. I wasn't, Jen mentioned she hadn't seen it yet. I haven't either. And I really had no intention, guys, of going and seeing it, but you have me hooked.
By the way, that is called a Troy-cot.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, a one-man Troy-cot is the show title for the show this week. No doubt about that.
Bring me a bottle of vodka and I'll show you a cot.
I'll tell you this, that the first movie, when it did come out, there was a AMS meeting in Oklahoma City. It was a committee meeting, meeting. I don't know what subcommittee, what conference it was, but they asked if I would do a talk about that. So I took clips from the first movie and made an hour presentation for their dinner thing that night, and it was all of the hiccups in the movie that weren't quite right. It's going in the wrong direction, all kinds of things like that. And they, oh yeah, I love this. So you need to go to the AMS annual meeting and give this talk. And I was like, well, okay, I'll think about it. But I think the AMS meeting was somewhere like out in California, and I'm thinking, I don't really want to be any place where the movie folks might come and think this was getting bashed or whatever. So I didn't do it. But I won't, unnamed meteorologist friend of mine took that video and everything, and I find out like 10 years later he's been going on cruise ships and giving this talk about Twister, and based on stuff I had done. It's like, and getting the cruise for free for his wife and him. I go, well, I should have done that. But this movie, the director, it was an interesting choice of the director, and I'm sure he is tired of talking about this. But here's a guy from basically the border of Arkansas, Oklahoma, grew up with tornadoes, had this love of weather and everything, but he's also a excellent storyteller. If you watched his, I pronounce it Minari, and that's wrong. I don't know how the right pronunciation is, but if you've seen his work, how he develops characters. And so at the very beginning of this one, we talked about, I just look, the first movie, the script of the first movie, I thought was pretty thin. I mean, it was just like, I don't know, there wasn't much. The characters were fun and there was good interaction. There was a lot of comedy and humor, and it was great. But that was about it. So I thought it was thin, but it was great. Anyway, what I believe he successfully did, and this was my very first comment to him when I saw it after the LA premiere, was I believe that he's created characters that interact in a more meaningful way, and he motivated them in a more meaningful way. And there's like a story and a disaster movie, and they're put together, and you can follow it from either one. And when you read some of the critics online, it's interesting. Some will pick up on that and they'll say, well, this was really, there was something here that a little bit meatier. And then others will say, well, it's a great disaster movie. Visual effects were great. But there's that tug, and he had to kind of walk that line. He couldn't make it preachy. He couldn't make it. He had to have all the studio wanted all the special effects great. And I think he checked that box. But I think it's underrated on how much he did to develop the characters.
Well, thank you for y'all's contribution. I mean, you've got me hooked on it, so we'll add another ticket to the pile. So yeah.
Absolutely, and I'll be really excited to hear your take, Troy.
Okay.
It is possible that you need to turn at least some part of your science brain off for the movie. We won't give it away. There's only so much I think you can do. Maybe we can come back around to this in a second, Kevin. But it's probably less painful than you think, because of all the extraordinary efforts put forward by these two guys. I do want to take a point that you were just raising, Kevin, about all the investment that the director put in, and the actors, the crew, that they put into the science and learning about the culture and everything. And turn this to a question for Rick. Rick, you've been sharing recently some of your experiences from everything getting put together before the filming started. And I would love for you to share a little bit of what went on behind the scenes to cultivate exactly what Kevin is talking about. How did he, as the director, foster this connection to our, let's be honest, we have some deep nerdery, and a lot of the deep stuff came into this movie.
Yeah, it was apparent from the first time we interacted, and Sean and Kevin have said this, and we'll say it again, that Isaac, the director, was just very passionate about telling a good story and about getting it right. And of course, we had interactions about making the forecast office look good, but one of the things I was really impressed with was I got a call from the production office one day, and they wanted to do weather training for the cast and crew. Our spotter training season was winding down, and they were like, "Well, we know it's probably too late for one of those, but could you do a class for us?" I said, "Sure." And I said, "Well, what do you want? Do you want a spotter training class? Do you want a weather background class to help the actors with their characters? Do you want a tornado safety class for these hundreds of people that are going to be moving to Oklahoma?" And the answer was yes. They wanted it all. So we kind of put that together, and we had, I think, about 20 people come to the building. It was on May 3rd of last year, very fitting anniversary, and Isaac was there, and Ashley, the executive producer, and about 9 cast, 9 crew were there. Kevin was there. It was great to have them there. And we just did a 2-hour class on tornado safety, spotter training, but I really opened it up with tornado culture. And I just wanted them to understand where they were going to be for the next couple of months. They were going to start shooting just a few days after that. What the culture is. What does more mean? When you say more around here, what does that mean? What does May 3rd mean? I showed them the various TV meteorologist drinking games and bingo cards. I showed them the F5 IPA. I show, just think how ingrained tornadoes are in this culture. And it's much more than a movie. You're going to be living and eating out and going to bars and restaurants with people who, to them, isn't a movie. This is their lives, and people have been impacted. And I didn't realize what a big part it was in the movie. Kind of the core of the movie was the whole concepts of PTSD, and what a big thing that was here too. So they were so receptive and so open, and Isaac was just so supportive, and he really wanted them to hear that, and even had really good questions. And one of the memories I'll never forget, and I've been posting pictures of some of this because I've been waiting 18 months to talk about this stuff, and I've been taking notes and just waiting for the day. So is Daisy Edgar Jones, who plays Kate, sitting on the front row of the class. She walked in with a notebook. She opened it up. It already had stuff in it, and she took notes the entire time. And Glenn Powell sat on the front row and listened, and everybody had good questions. To me, that just showed that they were willing to take the time, these actors who had just moved to Oklahoma, to come out and listen to that. And they got lots of good advice going forward. Kevin was on set a bunch of days. They got advice from Sean. So we got the ball rolling, I think, with some of that. But I think it really gave them an appreciation for what we do and what really goes on. And, and Kate, for a time in the movie, is a National Weather Service meteorologist. So she got to kind of see what that was like and talk to actual meteorologists, actual forecast office meteorologists. So I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question, but it was just a sign to me how interested they were, and just interactions I would have with Kevin and Sean, and just things that were being discussed. I could just tell that they really, this was going to be different. I knew it was going to be different. I knew it was going to be hopefully very, very good.
So I'm going to jump in here. First of all, I don't know how I've done it, but I've managed to ignore all of y'all for 25 minutes. I have no idea what you just said. No, I'm just kidding. I've been trying to block you out so I don't, with the spoilers, but I'm so excited to see this. This is amazing. I do want to focus it on Rick a little bit because one of the questions came in on Facebook was that Rick Smith we saw. And so Rick, you had a little cameo in here, and that led to an email that came in from, was it Tony Rice that wrote this email? So I'm going to read this from Tony Rice. Rick Smith has a bacon number of 2 thanks to Twisters. Rick Smith was in Twisters with Glenn Powell, 1 who was in Top Gun Maverick with Tom Cruise, and 2 who was in A Few Good Men with Kevin Bacon. And then Tony continues, for the record, I have a bacon number of 2, but a far weaker additional crew linkage than Rick's impressive screen debut. I served as a science advisor on an IMAX film in Saturn's Rings with Andrew Chaikin, number 1, who also advised Tom Hanks, number 2, on From the Earth to the Moon, who was in Apollo 13 with Kevin Bacon. I'm guessing there are other WeatherBrains with IMDb entries who could play this game with. And this is, of course, the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. I do not have an IMDb entry. Who does? And can you tie it to Kevin Bacon?
I know 2 of us. I know 2 people that do. I know Kevin does, and I somehow or another I have one too. So
I have one, but it's not. I don't think it's relevant. It was for Nova when they came out 12 years ago.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't even know what a bacon. I mean, I knew the 7 degrees of separation or whatever. I didn't even know what the bacon number was, but I guess Kevin would have the same bacon number, and Sean would have the same bacon number too. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they're all. I mean, all 3 of us got to be. Well, Kevin got to be a little bit more, but all 3 of us got to be background actors, extras. Well, I think they're technically called background actors now, but so you'll see Sean pop up there. He's kind of hard to miss. He's like 7 feet tall and standing on top of a truck. So you won't miss Sean a couple of times in the movie, 2 or 3 times. And then Kevin's a little bit more sneaky. You have to watch toward the end of the movie to see him. Kevin, you want to? What was your job title in the movie as your background actor role? You want to say?
Okay, here we go. I like the way the screen popped up. You're you. Just to let you know right away. The first movie in Twister, I was actually a professor, and I was in the hallway, and the director's cut, I think it survived, but nowhere else. And so Bill Paxton came looking for his wife to get the divorce papers signed, and he was coming to the university where she supposedly worked. All right, they cut that all out, so that was nothing. But this one, I was a cotton candy vendor. And I had to learn how to make the cotton candy in real time for this scene. And again, it's one of those things, you have 50 people all around you, and you have 2 or 3 cameras, and they had a boom camera. And so the timing had to be just right. So I had to figure out how to make this cotton candy, real machine, and then hand it off to a little girl. And it had to be timed right because this boom is coming around. And so that when the handoff happened, it was right in her hand. And we kept flubbing that, and the reason was I couldn't hear them say action because the cotton candy machine was making a horrific noise. And so I was kept like, and then finally, if you know what a PA is, it's a production assistant, and they're the glue to all of this stuff. They make the world go round. So the PA says, "What's the deal?" I said, "I can't hear anything." So we worked out hand signals. So when all kinds of hand signals for starting and stopping and all that. So we eventually figured that out. Well, that scene was cut as well. But after that scene, you run it into we won't go too far into this, but there's everybody takes cover in a movie theater, right? And so then stuff happens, and then you're standing up at the end. And I didn't even see me until the second time I saw it. So you have to really look carefully to see it.
First time, yeah, it was. But,
well, you've got good eyes. Yeah. One of another unbelievable connection here was that I learned afterwards that the little girl that I handed the cotton candy to, who was supposed to turn around and point, and she was supposed to be, pointing out that the monster tornado at the end, the Sentinel girl, whatever they had a nickname for, that little girl was the granddaughter of J.C. Watts, who was not only the football hero in Oklahoma, but also a congressman who I had got to know because he lived around just a couple blocks away. My kids played ball with him. But more importantly, I had won an award from NOAA, and he somehow heard about that, and he wrote me a nice letter congratulating me on the award, which was like one I've ever gotten from a Senate or Congressman. So I put it up on my wall, and it was there for my whole career. And then here I am, not knowing that I'm handing this thing and being in a scene with his granddaughter. And my wife later tells me that she taught the granddaughter's mom in elementary school. So we had all these connections we didn't know about afterwards. So that was pretty cool.
That's very cool. Yeah. Yeah.
There's
my job as a background actor was much easier. I just had to be a National Weather Service meteorologist sitting behind a monitor. So I think I nailed it personally. But,
absolutely.
Sean, go ahead.
I was going to say, so there's actually a little bit more to that story. I'm going to embarrass Kevin here for a second because he didn't bring it up, and I was waiting for him to. So in that scene where he's handing that cotton candy out, he actually doesn't have a line, right? Most people don't realize this because if you've never been on a movie theater set before, like it is dead silent. You are not allowed to make any noise unless you have a speaking line at all, right? So background actors, you're milling about. You're acting like you're talking, you're making the mouth movements, but you're not supposed to say anything because that can be picked up on the mic. So Kevin's like role in this was actually not to talk, just make the cotton candy and hand it, right? But they kept doing it again and again and again and again. And just natural human instinct kind of took over. And eventually Kevin started saying, well, here you go. Here you go. And he just like, he's not even registering that he was doing it. That actually gets picked up on the mic in some of the takes. So Kevin now has a speaking line in the movie because he inadvertently was talking during filming. And they found that later in post-production when they were going through the scenes. So fun tidbit there. Kevin does have a speaking role in the movie.
And then they called me and said, I have to now fill out paperwork to be part of the Actors Guild, which I did. And after like 3 or 4 iterations of this mountain of paperwork, I'm going, all this for like $50? There's no way. And they go, it's not $50. They had just negotiated the new contract, and it turned out to be not $50. It was well worth filling out some paper for an accidental line I had no business even saying.
That's awesome. So my question is for both of you. You know, we alluded to it, you know, the original movie, 1996. And you know, of course, there's a litany list of things that are incorrect and all that kind of stuff. And then I'm sure that there's going to be folks in the Weather Enterprise that we're going to look at this and find a few things that we can nitpick. But just letting all that go, you know, what the Twister did in, you know, 1996, it led to this influx of chasers and interest in weather and all that. It was such a boom for that. What is the hope for, you know, I want both of you to answer this with this movie. What do you hope the Weather Enterprise and, you know, teenagers who watch it, college students, whoever that are interested in weather, what do you hope that we take away from this, you know, between now and the next Twisters release, you know, the next one that comes down the pike?
Sean, you go ahead and answer first.
Okay, I gotta go first. So I was 10, right, when the original movie came out. It's something that I grew up watching. I love the original movie, despite all of its many inaccuracies, right? And you know, we talked earlier about how enrollment, particularly at OU's program, like doubled or even tripled for years to come. And then we saw a slight decline. Then the Storm Chaser series came out and it peaked back up. And then it's kind of been coming downhill. This movie is going to do the exact same thing because it dramatizes and it brings to the forefront a lot of the work and the effort that we're doing in the real world to try to understand these types of things. And I think my hope for the movie, and this was part of at least my motivation for wanting to make it as authentic and real as possible, was to try to set as good of a stage and a picture for the people, for the kids now that are going to become the next generation of meteorologists in the future. That way they have a better, more realistic idea of what the real world looks like and the real research that we're working on now with the real tools that we're working on now to be that inspiration going forward. And I've had a lot of people be like, well, this is going to make chasing so hard. It's going to bring so many people out, that sort of thing. I'm honestly not that worried about it. And the reason I say that is because that already exists in your face all over the place, right? Like you can scroll Twitter, you can get on YouTube. There's so much material out there because everybody has access to a cell phone, and it's so dramatic. And there's a lot of people that do it for money, and like you get photos and videos and stuff, so you get that like brief shot of fame. So there's so many people now that have access to this that they're doing it already. I really don't have a fear for it like drastically increasing that. I think the people that are going to do it are already doing it. So my hope with the movie is to just inspire the next generation of meteorologists and researchers that are going to come into the field specifically because they saw this movie and they got excited about it and they wanted to know more.
We can kind of go around here toward the end and kind of, for those of you who've seen it, kind of if you have any reactions that you want to share. One of the things I definitely wanted to share was Kevin mentioned this earlier, how the character development's a little bit better this time, and all you hear is about Glenn Powell, Glenn Powell, Glenn Powell, and yeah, anybody can walk through the rain in a white t-shirt. Big deal. What's the big deal about that?
And not look like that.
No. I'm kidding. I'm obviously kidding. But I mean, this is kind of Daisy Edgar Jones's movie. I mean, it's her story, and because I've been such a champion for this, or talking about it a lot, the mental health issues, the PTSD. Again, not to get too deep into the movie, spoiler territory, but her acting is phenomenal, and the way that she portrays that, and the way you see the before and after, and the way that you just see the evolution of her, how she evolves throughout the movie is just amazing to me. So, which kind of brings me back around. And again, this is going to be hard to talk about without spoilers, but if you remember back to the Super Bowl when we all saw the first trailer for Twisters, and you get immediately on social media, and what was every meteorologist in the world completely up in arms about? The overpass, right? The why were the people running under the overpass? Don't they know not to do that? Again, it's going to be kind of hard to talk about the overpass completely without spoiling things, but it's clear if you've seen the movie that the movie makers in no way are endorsing or promoting or saying in any way, shape, form, or fashion that it's a good idea to take cover under an overpass. But Kevin, that's kind of one of the things that, as you were going through the process, and you saw that in the script, but that was such a key part of the story. I mean, it was when we first saw it on the Super Bowl trailer and people were really upset about it. I mean, I knew there's no way they're going to make this be something other than something that meteorologists would support. So, I mean, that was kind of one of those tough things you had to kind of bring up and say, well, this isn't great, right?
Yeah, might have been the toughest conversation we had, because my role was basically to advise them, towards the science, and then give them options if they didn't like the way it was, or didn't like my first suggestions or second suggestions. We would keep going out, but there were a couple of things that were almost not negotiable, so I went into quite a lot of detail about the history of the overpass and the stuff that we learned in Oklahoma, people stopping on I-35, backing up the highway, and they're all sitting ducks and all of this kind of stuff. We went through that a lot, so you can see that the script did evolve in a way, and that's, Rick, you were on the leading point on all this, because you were getting all hammered by all of those questions, and then relay them to me. But all I kept saying was, wait till the movie comes out, wait till the movie comes out. And then of course, for those who haven't seen it, you'll figure it out. But they got that message, and they respected that message, and then they delivered on that.
Man, I wish we could talk about it. Jen, could you cover your ears for? No, I'm just kidding. It's so powerful. It's so powerful. So, James, you've seen the movie. Have you got any thoughts, any questions for Kevin or Sean or?
Which James?
James A.
Okay.
Also, okay, James. You.
You know, huge props to you two for all of the correct science that you probably influenced them to do. But the one thing, the one omission was the night before a bunch of severe weather. They're all having a good time and they're not hunched over their computer hitting refresh, 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 because we all know that's what really happens.
Yeah.
Well,
But
you're waiting on
fantastic.
the newest fur run to come out.
Yeah.
It hasn't loaded yet. So you got to find something to do to fill the time. So
Exactly. But props. It was amazing. And my first comment, our chapter of the American Meteorological Society rented a theater to watch it in Saturday afternoon. And my first comment to people was, oh my gosh, it is 10,000 times better than the first one. There were characters there. The science was so much better. It was a superhero movie where the tornado's the villain.
I will say, without spoiling anything for Jen, like, I think the most unrealistic part of this movie is the utter lack of traffic on any of the roads. That at any given point, there's only like 3 or 4 people from the movie that are on the roads. Like, that's probably like my top like complaint is like, you should have just added about 10,000 more people and made it very realistic and had traffic jams. Then it'd be perfect. Nothing else to add.
And because almost every one of these tornadoes happened in my county warning area in the movie, I do want anybody that's not from Oklahoma to understand and believe that there are warnings in Oklahoma for tornadoes. People do know where to take shelter in a tornado without being told. And large outdoor venues that would be going on during said tornadoes would have been canceled the day before. Hence, there would be no movie, no drama. So anyway, that's one of the big things for me is you just have to turn that off. You just have to turn that part of your brain off because it does make us look like, wait, I thought there was a weather service, but I mean, there is some warning, like, I don't know, 90 seconds or something at the rodeo, everybody's phones go off. But anyway,
Rick, I'll play off of that. Obviously we've talked a lot about all the things we admire, but everyone's going to have their thing they hone in on this movie. That's like their hobby horse. They're like, oh, they didn't do X, Y, Z. As the social scientist sitting in the theater, everything you just said about there are warnings. People do know what to do. The one thing I so wish maybe could have been better is if they would have showcased like what you actually do in a tornado, like, and how safe the options are. That piece was really missing. So if you guys have ins for the next one, if they'd like a social science consultant, I would absolutely love to fill that role because I can tell them a whole lot more about the realistic responses people would have, and you can still have tons of drama with it. I mean, there were so many things they could have done. So if they want ideas, I'm their girl. That's the bottom line.
Oh, that's perfect. That's got to happen.
Hey, Rick, what kind of makeup did you wear in this thing?
All right.
I have no idea. I did get to go to wardrobe and got to go to hair and makeup, but this was May 12th, and we walked about a half a mile to the building where we were shooting the weather service scene, and then the PA said, "Well, the elevator's kind of slow. We're going to walk up the stairs." Cool. Okay, to the 4th floor. So by the time I got to the 4th floor after walking over there in the humidity, whatever makeup they had put on me was in a puddle on it was gone, but it didn't, whatever it was, it didn't help. That's why I'm only seen from like the nose up in the movie.
I tell people all the time, paint on this barn will not help. It just will not help at all. So, in my case, it just doesn't work. So,
They tried.
So, and again, I've not seen the movie, so I can't comment, but how long was your scene, Rick? I mean, for those that are going to go watch this, looking for you, how long are you seen in this movie?
All right, you got to really stay awake at this part. It's right after a very intense opening sequence, and the time jumps ahead, and we see our main character riding a subway to work. We see a tour group of kids at the National Weather Service forecast office in New York City, and then Kate, the main character, briskly walks through the operations area of the office. As she's walking through, there's a steady cam following her, and I'm sitting at a workstation right there. So I think I counted 5.129 seconds that I'm on the screen, but and then it's it. I mean, then the weather service scene is, there's a little bit of dialogue that happens, and so yeah, it's right there, probably within 10 or 15 minutes of the very beginning of the movie. Don't
If you
miss it.
ever
I've had a few-
remember Tool Time, do you remember Tool Time, the show on TV?
We talked about that.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
He's definitely,
The neighbor.
He's the neighbor looking across the fence.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you
That's
know it's you. I
outstanding.
mean, it's enough to know it's you.
Yeah. And I was working with Jen today, that I wrote this blog post because I took all these notes last May because I know I've signed an NDA. I'm not going to be able to talk to anybody about this forever. And by the time I can talk about it, I will have forgotten most of it. So I took notes on the day and I saved the notes. And then, so this week's newsletter is going to have kind of my account of what it was like to be a background actor, like working a 16-hour severe weather day and then showing up at 6 a.m. call time. And then just, I don't know, there were some very cool interactions that happened. Daisy, who was playing Kate, she stopped at one point and asked me if how her line sounded. Did she sound legitimate? And I told her I would hire you in a heartbeat to work for the weather service. So it's and there's hundreds of those moments. There's so many background actors in the movie, and everybody's got their little. I was just thinking of all those families this weekend going to the movie and watching to see if you could see themselves in the movie, and everybody's got those. So that's I would do it again in a heartbeat. And when they make the sequel, and they've got to make a sequel, I mean, it's just gonna happen. My goal is to be in a tornado this time, not sitting in the same office that I do in real life. So
You need a new agent. You need a new agent. That's what all I'm saying, Rick. So
I'm looking at Kevin and
that-
Sean. Those are going to be my agents, I think.
No, they're good. These guys are good. So here's the question I'm getting. People are asking me, and I don't know anything about film distribution. When will this move from the theaters to Netflix, Hulu, Apple TV Plus, where people can watch it at home? When does that happen?
No idea.
Don't know.
Yeah, I think, and this is not based on any conversation with anybody at Universal, but like I feel like most movies, like they spend maybe a month or so in the theater, and then usually like that 4 to 5 month time frame after it comes out is when you start seeing like the DVD releases and that sort of thing. Although it does tend to show up on streaming services earlier than that. I will say that I had a conversation with Patrick at one of the after parties after one of the premiere events. I am super excited about the limited edition, like collector's edition release of the movie. It's going to have a really cool display on it. It's going to have a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that shows how they made the movie and filmed a lot of the sequences, interviews with the cast. And I'm sure there's some stuff from Kevin and I in there as well. So I'm really, really looking forward to that one when it comes out.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it. I signed a release the other day, just a few days ago, for Universal Home something. There's going to be a behind the scenes of the class that we taught for the cast and crew. So that's going to be one of the features on the DVD. So yeah, I can't wait to see that and all the other stuff. There's going to be so much cool stuff. And our friend Emily Sutton, who's an Oklahoma City TV meteorologist, I know she's really looking forward to the DVD coming out because it's a long story, but she's in the movie as kind of the background. Here's what's going on in the weather, kind of here's a forewarn update or whatever, and she's talking about the high risk. Well, one of the main chasers, has a huge crush on Emily, and it wasn't in the movie. They didn't use it in the movie, but they've got deleted scenes. So I mean, he carries around a picture of Emily Sutton that she signed for him and like kisses it before a chase, or there's so much stuff I can't wait to see when the DVD comes out.
Go ahead, James.
I was just going to say, I don't have I don't have an optical. I didn't know DVDs were still a thing here. I mean, I literally do not own an optical drive here. So hopefully somebody's going to put all this content somewhere digitally so you can see it without an optical drive. I didn't know DVDs were still a thing. Goodness, maybe I need to go buy a DVD player.
I will say that I really hope in some of the background scenes and stuff that show up in things as they come out, we did get an opportunity to take the cast chasing. This was something that we talked about a lot during filming, but obviously you can imagine shutting down a multi-million-dollar film production is something you don't want to suggest to the Universal executives. I mean, we're talking about millions of dollars a day. Not only the fact that like taking the talent out in a car and driving after tornadoes while they're in the middle of production is also probably a really terrible idea. But after production, this past like spring season, which was really active, I was able to get Glenn, Daisy, and Brandon all out to go storm chasing. It was very last minute. Originally, when I brought it up, the general vibe that I'd gotten from like Universal Studios legal was absolutely not. We will never allow that to happen. So instead, this time I just texted Glenn and Daisy and I was like, hey, there's a day coming up. Like, do you guys want to go? And when the talent tells you they want to go, things tend to work a little bit better and a little faster, right? So we ended up taking them out. It was, I believe it was April 15th. I'd have to look back at my photos or whatever that we took that day. We ended up not seeing anything. It's one of those mini days that looks great, you know, like 4 or 5 days out. By the time we start making arrangements and making flights and that wheel is turning, right, then it started to trend downhill. So it was, you know, it was ultimately not as exciting of a day as I'd hoped to give them, although my definition of what's exciting is, you know, probably a little higher than most people's. But I will say it was quite fun because we got up into Southwest Kansas. You know, I had the cast launching weather balloons that we were sending back data, like real data to Rick at the Weather Service office to use. And we ended up in Southwest Kansas really late at night. They had a flight the next day. They had to get back to like all the stuff that they were doing at like 7 a.m. And I looked at Glenn, Daisy, and Brandon, and I said, hey guys, like it's like 11:30 midnight. Like we're up here like Dodge City. We can call this off. Like, do you guys want to go home? And Glenn looked at me and he said, I will buy property in Southwest Kansas before we call this chase off. I am not quitting. And I was like, all right, let's keep going, you know. So I think we got back at like 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning, but we had a great time. And I really hope they show some of that footage and stuff in the behind the scenes.
So I have to, and again, I don't want to give it away for people who haven't seen it. Did they make television meteorologists look like idiots in this one?
No, I don't think so. It's well, one of it could be that's up for interpretation. There's 3 TV meteorologists that are included. Emily gets the longest little segment. Damian Lotus plays a Tulsa TV meteorologist. You've seen him in the trailers. And then there's a third Oklahoma City TV meteorologist, I'm not going to spoil it, that also appears more briefly in the movie. So
if you remember the first one, Gary England had the most prominent role, and you could recognize his voice, and then he was actually on the video, and you could actually see him. But when I watched the first movie in preparation for this one, which I hadn't seen in over 20 some years, I noticed there were really 3 meteorologists in the first one from different stations. Rick Mitchell was in there and Gary England, and I forget who the other one was, but yeah, they slipped in 3 meteorologists. And there's not a line in this one that belittles being a weatherman, because that's what they said to Bill Paxton. They said, you know, when he went out and got back with his old crew, and they said, well, you left us to be a weatherman or a TV weatherman or something. That doesn't happen here.
Awesome. All right. Well, I hate to do this. We have to break for a couple of minutes. We have to go to Tony Rice very quickly. We have This Week in Tornado History. We're going to come back, fellas. If y'all can stay with us for a few more minutes, we're going to have picks of the week, and we hope that you both will have something very cool for us. But let's take a quick pause. We're going to hear from Tony Rice, the Astronomy Report. We've got This Week in Tornado History with Jen, and we'll come back with more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your Astronomy Outlook.
You may have seen some mention of 2 overlapping meteor showers on July 30th. Some Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and other social media channels are calling it rare. More on that in a minute. Here's what is true. The southern Delta Aquariid meteor shower peaks on the evening of July 29th into the next morning. The Alpha Capricornid meteor shower peaks on the 30th into the 31st. Now, the waxing crescent moon will help a bit, with only about a quarter of the face of the moon lit. That's not enough to warrant any level of hype. Neither meteor shower is in the same league as, say, the Geminids or the Perseids, so don't expect more than a few per hour. The Delta Aquariids are only expected to produce about 4 or 5 per hour, even from the darkest of locations. And the Alpha Capricornids, they're classified as a minor shower, which means you'll be lucky to see a single meteor from just about anywhere. It's worth pointing out that this coupling of showers isn't rare, far from it. This happens every year, because that's how meteor showers work. Earth passes through the trail of dust and debris left by the parent comet for each of these meteor showers at the same time each year. On rare occasions, an otherwise unimpressive meteor shower like these can experience an outburst of activity. There's no indication that that might happen this year. In fact, any forecast of outbursts should be viewed very skeptically because forecasts of outbursts have a really poor history of being right. That's because it's difficult to impossible to predict. Outbursts are generally caused by the pushing and pulling of those dust trails by the big planets in our solar system like Jupiter and Saturn. Modeling this is really difficult and not something a whole lot of research has been put into. So I won't be setting my alarm for either of these. The next meteor shower we're getting excited about is the Perseids, peaking on Sunday, August 11th into the early hours of Monday, August 12th. These unfortunately peak on the night of the first quarter moon, so there's going to be a bit more lunar light pollution to deal with. But the Perseids are known for providing a pretty good show, with a dozen or more meteors per hour visible from most locations. It's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
This week in tornado history, 14 tornadoes were confirmed on July 25th, 2000. All but one were in the state of Minnesota, and the most devastating traveled 9 miles through parts of Yellow Medicine County and hit portions of Granite Falls. A total of 15 people were injured, and sadly, there was one fatality. Per a report in the Star Tribune on July 27th, 2000, Mr. Arlie Swanson was crushed by his green pickup truck. He apparently left his house to take shelter under the vehicle. For the National Weather Service storm data entry, most of the damage in Granite Falls was caused by F2 and F3 winds. It was officially classified, though, as a minimal F4 based on the twisted wreckage of an overturned railroad car. For the Star Tribune, 41 houses were destroyed, 300 were damaged. That was nearly 1/3 of the homes in Granite Falls at the time. Read more about this event and over 500 more at tornadotalk.com.
All right. Let's dive in and see. Maybe we got some email this week.
We do. First of all, thanks to everyone who gave us questions tonight for the show. Those were great. First, a small disclaimer about email. When you send us an email, if you could please add at the bottom your name and your email address, that would be very helpful. We're having a small email snafu, and sometimes we're getting emails and we have no idea who sent them. So it's like, oh, fun. Guess the emailer. But if you could add that just for right now, that would be really great. And that way we can get back to you because we can't read all emails on the show, but we want to try to, we do read them, I promise, even though we may not know who they come from. Anyway, I do want to read an email, and this led to actually a show idea. I'm going to bring Troy in on this, but we got an email from Nick, who's a recent high school grad, and he's going to be attending the University of Wisconsin and pursuing his degree in the Atmospheric and Oceanic Sciences program. And it just wanted to say, hey, what's some advice that you would give to those going into college, or have you all worked with those who have graduated college? Just what's some advice? And so, Troy, this led to a great idea from you, and this led to a future show that we're going to have on August 5th.
Yeah, and I thank Nick so much. I had a great visit with Nick, and Jen's aware of this. I think the WeatherBrains are as well. But I got to Nick on a Zoom call last Thursday night, and what a young man. He's got his act together and so forth, and had a lot of good questions. I tried to answer the ones I could. The other ones I sent to Jen. So Jen kind of helped. But what we talked to Bill about earlier today, a little bit, Jen and I had, is coming up on Monday night, the 5th of August. Is that right, Jen?
That's right.
We're gonna do something that Jen and I and Bill have created. We're gonna call it College Night. And what we're going to do on that show that night is have no guest, really, kind of stick with the WeatherBrains. And what we're going to do is just go through individually and we're fixing to begin a new semester. You have kids that are going back for their first time ever, like Nick, University of Wisconsin. But you also have students returning for the senior year just to talk about the college experience and how that's such a big change. If you're headed off to school, just advice, life advice. We're not going to tell you need differential equations for meteor. I already know that. Okay. You already know that. But we're just going to talk about advice in 2024. And this is, I think Jen would agree. I think the WeatherBrains, everyone would agree that, especially in Nick's case, coming through high school and graduating this spring, he went through high school during COVID. And this, to me, is so unfair. I see it at the University of Texas with students. Nothing we can do about it. We try to do our best in dealing with it. But I think they have a lot of questions. So I think on the 5th, on that Monday night, Jen, you and I'll kind of steer the conversation toward 5 to 7 or 8 minute individual. Hey, here's some things you need to know. You headed off to school. Here's a new semester. And again, I want to thank Nick for reaching out and thank Jen for getting on top of that as a result of that email. We figured that one out, by the way, Jen.
We did.
Yeah.
No, I think it's a great idea and I'm excited. And so, if you are in high school right now, or you're a college student, or you've just graduated, if you want to shoot some emails our way and, with questions that you have, we would love to have that. And again, make sure you add your name and email address.
Yep.
That would be helpful. But no, we just want to, we've got a wealth of information here from all the different backgrounds with the crew, and we just want to help you and guide you all. And I have a heart for working with younger people. I've worked with Nelson, who I've known since high school, and then now he's a junior in college, and just, kind of just watched him blossom and where he's going to go next. I mean, he will be, I think, the next Ted Fujita with his skill set. And I have a heart for watching these kids learn, and I learn from them too. I mean, I do not know as much as they do, and I just absorb it like a sponge. And so that's another thing too, is just what can we learn from these kids who, as James fans said often, we have a great generation here, and they're going to be the ones taking meteorology into new higher heights here. And it's really awesome. So I'm looking forward to working with you, Troy, on that and the whole team. And so that's our email of the week. Please, send us your emails, email@weatherbrains.com. Make sure you check out the newsletter. If you've not signed up for the newsletter, why not? Go to the website, click on the little link under our cute faces, and sign up for our newsletter that you get every Thursday morning. And this week it is Rick, and he's going to be talking about his experience with twisters. So that'll be awesome to see. James Spann, back to you.
Before we throw it back to James, one thing, James. So put this on your calendar. Nick wanted me to remind you that I believe there's a certain college up north that'll come south in September to play in your neck of the woods. And he said it would mean everything in his life if he could get the chance to meet you. So James Spann, I tell you, this young man Nick's really pretty special, and didn't make any promises, but I told him that y'all may argue over the football end of it, but bottom line, I know you'd love to see him. So
we will make that happen. That's one thing for sure. All right. So let's do, by the way, while we're talking about film, I don't think I'm supposed to show this, but this is a little tease here, and I'll just leave it at that. I've not technically signed an NDA here, but I'm just saying there will be other weather films coming out that might be interesting. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. So let's do picks of the week. This is where everybody's gonna come around and share something that's weather related or something close to weather. And mine, let me just say mine up front. I don't know what started this, but there's fear porn all over the social platforms over the New Madrid fault, the seismic zone, that there is an imminent catastrophic earthquake that will wipe out tens of thousands of people, create the end of society as we know it. And of course, it's like the Category 6 hurricane lady last year that said, Florida is going to be taken off the map and all, but it's being shared by millions of people. So what I do when I glance over at the inbox, is it true? 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 And I don't have time to deal with this. So my pick of the week, it's a simple page from USGS concerning the New Madrid seismic zone. What is it? The history. This is what you can expect. The truth. And I don't think people know what the truth is anymore. But anyway, that'll be my pick of the week. All right, let's go over to Kim. Kim, what you got for us? Give us something good.
Sure. So I'm going to share something from an organization called CNA. They have done a lot of work in combating mis and disinformation. So very apropos, James, from what you were just talking about. I had the opportunity to be on a panel with them representing multiple agencies. There were a bunch of folks on there, and I was sort of providing the weather angle to the conversation. It was actually a whole webinar on mis and disinformation in hurricanes. And what I loved about it, I learned so much from the experts who track mis and disinformation about the stuff that goes on in hurricanes from foreign actors, things I had no idea. But you might be really interested in checking it out. I know we talk a lot about the aspects of the forecast information itself and making sure that we're putting out really good, high quality forecasts and not amplifying, the 360-hour GFS that's fanciful. But well beyond that, there are malign actors that are seeking to undermine trust in public officials. There are people who are trying to sow confusion over, the resources that are available to adapt and all of the other things that surround things like evacuation and who's evacuating, where are people evacuating. All of that is actually a really complex network of information that isn't all put together by the government in one centralized place right now. So it's a hotbed of disinformation in and of itself. So highly recommend. It was a really interesting webinar to be a part of. And at the same time, they offer some tips for things that are battle tested, things that you can try to do to combat mis and disinformation.
That's outstanding. Absolutely outstanding. It is a number one problem for a lot of us right now. It's just rough out there. All right, James Adelot, who'll soon be on the news. Give us a good pick of the week.
Mine is an homage to all the people that will be inspired to a career in meteorology or emergency management from this movie, because there are a lot now that were inspired by the 1996 movie. And I admitted that I'm old enough to probably have been inspired by this 1956 black and white documentary with Jesse and Helen. And I included a couple of little screen caps in it, and they're looking dutifully out the southwest corner of their house for the upcoming cyclone. And they walk over and phone in the report to their local National Weather Service, and his certificate that he's a real spotter is right there on the wall, right by the wall phone. And it's awesome. And I put the YouTube link so you can watch that documentary as well.
See, 1956?
I think it was. I don't know.
Wow.
It's definitely 50s, 60s. Yeah. Yep.
That's outstanding. I can't wait to see that.
don't
Again,
know
all these
how I
picks
knew
will be up
that.
on WeatherBrains.com. Troy, while you got the floor, give us a pick. Go.
Yeah, I don't know how I knew that. I don't really have anything. I get the foghorn pass tonight. I've got thunderstorms closing in on Austin right now, so just kind of watching those. So next.
Love to hear that foghorn. All right, Jen, what's your pick of the week?
Well, I had one, and then I'm going to add one too, because I thought of it while we were doing the show. But my first one is go local. Please visit your local museum, your local library, your history center. Go get to know the local historians in your area and learn from them, because they have a wealth of information on everything about your community. But the other thing I thought of, we have had this blog. We have what's called a funnel feature on the website, and we have guests. Writers, and this one's 7 years old, but it's one of our most popular writing. It's called The Fact Checking of the Film Twister. How accurate was it? From our guest writer Harrison Sienkiewicz, and he found 38 fact checks and went through them all, and it's very, very good the way he outlined it and had a few photos thrown in and what have you. It's a very entertaining read for those of you who want to do a little fact checking of the first Twister movie.
Excellent. Again, all these links on weatherbrains.com. Rick Smith, what's your pick of the week?
Well, in the Twisters theme, I mean, we've been working with NOAA Communications and others for months getting ready for the movie release, and we've got a whole web portal, noaa.gov/twisters. And if you go to that, there's links to all kinds of cool stuff, stories about people whose careers were influenced by the original movie, and one of the highlights for me is some of the really cool videos. Like we did a video on like, can there really be a fire tornado? Sean did a really good video on can you really disrupt a tornado? Eric Rasmussen has one. Danae Carlos is going to have some. Or overpass is safe, that kind of thing. So, and those are all on there, and it's all Twister themed, and you see the NOAA.gov at the end in the Twister font. I don't know, it's cool, but there's a ton of information. We're going to keep adding more stuff to it, so that's my pick.
Excellent. Good deal. All right, Kevin, we have stalled long enough. We know that you have something really good for us, so
Well,
go.
I was counting because my pick was going to be what Rick just mentioned, and he swooped it at the last. I thought maybe one more I can make it, but a couple of things. That is really good. Those videos are really good, and I came across those the other day. But two things related to the movie. So the first one is you may recognize the name Lee Orff, ORF. He's in the University of Wisconsin, and if you look at some of his animation of supercell development, that was part of some of the things that came to mind when we were trying to, and Sean was working on this together. We were, when you see the movie, you'll see that there's an animation in there, and it looks very similar to what Lee's doing. And if you haven't seen it, it's good stuff, and it's cutting edge. It's really supercomputer cutting edge. And the second thing was also related that never made it in the movie, but I threw it out there as one of the many things that they might think about. Have you ever heard of muons? Particles called muons. Okay. So a cosmic rays come through the atmosphere at the upper levels, and then they split certain atoms, and they create these little particles that are able to penetrate amazing things. Like they're using them to in the pyramids of Egypt to concentrate these things and getting images of tunnels and stuff they didn't know were there. But they're also using it in Japan to look at hurricane events, hurricanes, tropical cyclones and stuff, and getting some feel about what's going on there. And I thought, well, maybe it could be used for tornadoes as a new technology to look at tornadoes. But there was a flaw in that, and that they have to dwell for a while, and tornadoes don't give you the opportunity to dwell. So that kind of got nixed, and it was the right thing to nix that. But anyway, muons are interesting for their own right, and you might look that up.
That's too cool. Goodness gracious. This is way too cool. All right, Sean, beat that. Go.
All right, so Kevin's giving me new ideas now, so I'm going to have to go back to the drawing board and start creating some new instruments. And I figured it would either be Kevin or Rick that would do the NOAA.gov link. So I was like, all right, let's come up with something else. And one of the things that I think really impressed me about the movie, and what I really loved that Isaac was able to bring to the table, was the sense of diversity that is shown in the movie. I mean, the lead character is Kate. She's this just powerful woman in a field that unfortunately is very dominated by a lot of people that look like me, right? And I really, really love that they highlighted the power of that character and really bringing awareness to a lot of like the advancements that we've made in meteorology, and trying to empower everybody of all races and sexes to be involved in meteorology. So I'm going to give a huge shout out to girlswhochase.com and Jen Walton, who is a very big part of that and leads that effort. She has just done an incredible job at kind of like advocating for women in science and chasing in general. They put on a spring training program every year that is just absolutely phenomenal as far as teaching like basics of your weather mechanics, how to storm chase, that sort of thing. It's a great resource that I really encourage a lot of people that are especially watching this movie and then getting interested in things to go check out.
Outstanding. Great. Well, guys, let me tell you what. Again, I've not seen the movie, but it's amazing to me how few negatives I've seen. People are negative about anything now, anything. And it's been so positive. So you guys have clearly done something right. So if you hear anything tonight, thank you from the weather world for this. And for those that by chance, like me, have not seen it, how long do you think this theatrical run will go here? How long will this be in the theaters? Do you guys have any idea?
I wouldn't wait more than a month.
I mean, things are fast paced. Deadpool and Wolverine is coming out this week, and I think that's going to pull a lot of the attention off of it. But I will say, like, after watching it, and I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible, this is actually the first time in a lot of years, and COVID certainly has a lot to do with this, that we've had a true thrill ride, summer blockbuster type movie that's just energetic and it's high octane, and I mean it delivers on all of that. So I think it's going to have a good run in theaters. I know several people, meteorologists and non, that have gone back multiple times. I've actually seen people commenting that they never go to the theater multiple times to watch a movie, and they're going back to see it. They want to see it in IMAX, they want to see it in 40X, which, like, the 40X movie, man, like that's probably a little much for me. Like, I do that normally, right? So, like, I don't need the 40X theater, but for a lot of people, that's a great addition to that type of thing. So I think it's going to have a great run.
And I have no financial interest in this, but this is a movie to see multiple times. I mean, some of us has kind of taken it to the extreme, honestly, but I've seen it multiple times, and I really got a lot more out of it the second time. So yeah, I hope it's around a while, but I think Kevin's advice is good. Don't wait too long to go see it.
Awesome. So anything else we need to mention, fellas? Anything we need to plug? This is your chance before we wrap it up here. Any websites and anything else? This is your chance to plug away. Go.
I'll just say one thing, that the studio from the top down is really tuned into climate change. And we saw that at this summit, and then we saw it time and time again at the premiere, and if you read if you just Google Twister newspaper articles, whatever, and you see that they're on top of this. And on the set, they had all kind. They had I don't know what they called, but I think it was called a level 1 climate awareness sustainability campaign to try to recycle everything. And they were doing everything to leave a small footprint. So this is from the top of the studio down. They're trying to make people aware. So even though this movie isn't preachy about anything, which they wanted to not do that, they didn't want to alienate, but there are call outs to things that you'll get if you're tuned to it, especially if you see it 5 times, Rick, or for your example. But and I think that's really good. I think there's a dedication that if they can educate people in fun ways, which I think their goal is, then it's not a documentary, right? So how many people watch documentaries versus what watches this? It's not even close. So that's kind of their goal. And I think we should applaud them for that. We try to do whatever it might be we can to pass that message on and to support them in that role. I think it's a good service.
Yeah, and
Sean,
I'll just throw
you?
out, if anybody from Universal Studios is tuning in or listening, Twisters 3 or Twisters, if we just keep adding S's, I already got ideas. Let's get going on the sequel. This was so much fun. And honestly, just getting to meet everybody and the community that was involved and the incredible talent of the 400 plus people that were behind the scenes. Like, it was so fun. And like, it's like family to me now at this point. So really, really had a great time, and certainly looking forward to any opportunity I can to do it again.
All right. Well, fantastic. This has been a great show, fellas. Thank you all so much for being on the show here. If you're new, WeatherBrains is typically on the air every Monday night at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central. You can watch it live on the WeatherBrains YouTube channel, youtube.com/WeatherBrains. But we know that most of you listen however you consume this. We thank you. And if you want to get in touch with us, for the email address, it is email@weatherbrains.com. And like Jen said, for now, be sure and put your name and email address at the bottom of the note so we get that issue resolved. But on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week and God bless. Great show.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Kevin,
everybody.
Rick.
This was outstanding.
Thank you all so
Outstanding.
much.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks,
Thanks
Sean.
thanks for your time.
Yep.
Thanks so much
It
for
was
your
a lot
time,
of fun.
fellas.
Thanks,